Okay, folks, I'm back. I'm interested in talking about and exploring AI and technology and my stream of conscious thoughts on the matter. Because I find it very frustrating to talk to people who come at me with information that is like triggering. But it's not triggering in that, oh, this is going to take your job. It's triggering in a form of fatigue. And it's firstly not asked for, right? So I don't ask people to send me things. And then I'll get sent something that is annoying to think about, right? And I don't want to think about it anymore. But some people will send me, those things. And look, it's cool. I mean, the fact that somebody wants to share something is cool, but not if it pisses me off. And you might say, why does it piss you off? Do you have a skill issue? Uh, is something threatening you? And the answer is no. But it is threatening the larger world. Okay? And there are many ways to come at this, but I'm just going to ramble and explore and always framing these discussions with myself as if this showed up on my YouTube feed, right, and I listened to this, would this be enlightening? Would this be like full frame, full speed, the full picture? Would this person go deep? Would this person intuitively explore and imagine and creatively, uh, you know, juxtapose and what's the word? Conjecture, right? I want to conjecture. That's what I want to do here. So, because that's the fun, man. That's the interesting part about conversation. I don't give a fuck if you've read a bunch of studies that, let's be honest, are paid for or just fake. I mean, I can go write a web page and basically say that for me, Claude Code has made me a multimillionaire. I use AI every day. I've used AI to completely change the way that I live, such that I actually sleep only 1 hour. Okay? And I'm a multimillionaire. I have 3 homes. And the reason that I went from being a low class to middle class human to now being an elite aristocrat of America is by signing up and using Claude Code, right? Because that's essentially what all the articles are, right? Like if you were to just look at the 768 pixel part that loads when you load a web page for the article, if you just look at it, that's what it is. Okay? In so many words, it's now they're aristocrat because they use Claude Code. That's it, and that is most of the noise. And but that's all boring and obvious and whatever. So the thing I really want to get into is why it's so annoying talking with people who basically don't know, or I think they don't know, the technical foundations, what I think the technical foundations are, and how I'm choosing to navigate this, mainly to just see what I come up with here, but then secondly, like, maybe I'm wrong, right? Maybe it's not a useful frame, but I think it's sound, so here it goes. AI, artificial intelligence, is the current global term, the same term that used to be used for net, right? Everything was like back in the day when the internet came out. You had netbook, and to be honest, I wasn't really around for that, but I did work for a company and I went to AWS reInvent and everything was AI.ai, blah, 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 all these word plays with AI, because that's the term that everybody, you know, whatever adheres to this thing. And even if you're not doing, you know, anything that's like actually artificial intelligence, and instead you're using, and again, this is where we get into like LLMs, right? And these things like that's still AI, whatever. So it's the umbrella term, fine. Just like net was for a bunch of uh, presumably internet companies, and some of them didn't even use the internet or they were a piece of it in a way or whatever. So AI is the umbrella term. 9 times out of 10, people are talking about large language models, right? What are those? How do they work? What's a good way of thinking about them? To me, the way you should be thinking about large language models, which are all of these services, right? All the frontier labs are producing large language models. And those large language models uh, are essentially 2016, 2017, or maybe they were 2015 as well, inventions, right? And the large language model is an invention, right? And that invention is a novel discovery uh, with or pertaining to machine learning, neural networks, and this idea of how to generate a bunch of words and steer the generation into something coherent and useful. And what I mean by that is, and I'm going to stay very high level and not go super low level, and get into the implementation, just more of the mechanics and the ideas. What I mean by that is, a language model could literally just be a program that you ask it produce language, and it produces the word the over and over and over again. The. And then it has a limit function, right? So let's just say that a paragraph is 4 sentences and X amount of words per sentence, 11. I don't really know. I'm not a grammar person or didn't major in English, and I'm pretty dumb when it comes to writing. So whatever the word count, it produces that, and then it terminates, right? That's the limit function. So it's a very useless language model. It's not large, right? But it's a language model. That's what it produces. Language, English, the word the. Very useless, depending on your application. Then you decide, well, actually, it would be interesting, because I'm a huge fan of Shakespeare, if I could produce Shakespearean output when I tell it to. Generate a Shakespearean, uh, you know, paragraph, right? Same word count, same limit function, etc. Well, how would you do that? There's a bunch of ways to approach developing a system that would produce Shakespearean output. What the large language model is, right, which these things like GPT are, and again, maybe this is too specific for GPT, but I don't think it. I don't think it is, and it's useful regardless. So with GPT and this idea, what you would do is you would take the entire corpus of Shakespeare, right? You would sanitize the data so that it's useful, and then, and when I say useful, I mean chunked in a form that can be input into a system to basically store it. And then, and again, getting out of the implementation for a bit, you would essentially get the Shakespeare to take, you get the LLM to take an initial set of words, right, and parallelize the most probable next token based on the token that you've input first as the prompt. And so essentially you are scoring every single word in the Shakespearean corpus that you've quote unquote pre-trained, right? You've scored them all, and then you've put in like, uh, I don't know, Missy Lou is walking down the chateau, is walking to the chateau and bends down, right? Now, I don't know if those words exist in the corpus or not, but they have a ranking, they have a score as well. And so what you're doing at that point is you are inputting that, and the LLM is next token completing that to some limit function, and then passing that back to the client or whoever requested it. And then you are completing the next thing, right? Maybe you were to say, like, this isn't Shakespearean enough, make it more Shakespearean, okay? And that then gets passed back. So now you have the initial thing, the second thing, and the third thing as a completed set of tokens that is now being passed back to the LLM, and the LLM is completing the tokens. Okay, next token. So now it's a random phrase, the Shakespearean it returned, make it more Shakespearean, and then it's going to next token on that. And so there's a form of intelligence in which you need to have some understanding of more Shakespearean. And that is where reinforcement learning comes in, right? Human reinforcement learning. Because what you can do is you can do a next token for Shakespeare. You can just have it ramble on forever and produce a bunch of Shakespearean tokens, right, infinitely. And it's just hallucinating these linear algebra output bullshit that is just a continuous stream of scored words that the totality of the corpus produced. And then you can basically steer that with reinforcement learning, which is the important part, right? Which is what makes it actually sensical, right? So if the thing that makes Shakespearean the most Shakespearean is like some set or phrase, how do you actually teach the LLM that that is the important thing? And that's where you have to have a person, right? Or something, right? Logically, basically an if statement of some kind, or a scoring, or a value, or some system that basically can say, look, when you're tokenizing, when you're converting the prompt into these tokens, which have these scores, there is like weights to them, and they have like different pathways within this neural network that then get, you know, recombinated to then produce the outputs. And so, again, not being super technical about it, being a little bit more high level, that is kind of how a large language model works. So essentially what you're doing when you get into things like ChatGPT and all these frontier models is you are using the entire corpus of the internet instead of Shakespeare. So now you're taking all of the internet, okay, and then you're hiring a bunch of humans, and then you're getting them to create a set of tokens, right, which then gets passed to the LLM, right, through, that's the prompt, you're prompting it. It's then completing it to a limit function. It's passing it back to the user. The user is then steering it. Maybe they say, yay, this was really useful, thank you. Or they say, fuck you, this is useless, do something else. And then when it comes back, they say, hey, that's actually what I want and that's what I don't want, right? So this is very similar to how you would build a system for basically like most probable search results for an image, right? So if you go to Google, if you type in Apple and you go to Google Images, right, it doesn't do anything. Maybe it does now, but in the past, it doesn't do anything tricky to show you a picture of Apple. And you're essentially querying this database, right? So you could set something that like does color or does like whatever tag to see the result, and then you would say like, oh look, there's my apple. But what they ended up doing is just being like, yo, if somebody types apple, goes to Google Images and clicks on one, that's probably an apple, right? So they're using the human eye and intelligence and the natural kind of idea to score the ranking for the pictures of apples correlated to that word. Same idea with this, where there's like pre-training and post-training. I'm actually really not too sure much more than this, but like that's the first part of how you get a bunch of basically next token creation to be sensible, right? And that is largely what GPT-3 took the world by storm. That's it. That's all it did, right? And so, you could get a lot of use out of that, especially when you're doing very useless things to me that are pretty useless in reality. But, if you're grifting, if you're working, if you're just getting by, if you're not doing anything that's like actually useful, then having like a median, middle of the road reinforcement learned matrix to generate your words, natural language to natural language, is useful, then great. If it's not, if you're doing something that's really like important, maybe you're writing something that's like poetry, or you are, writing a novel, or you're doing something like, I would imagine you don't want whatever ranking and score and bullshit is there, right? Maybe if you suck, maybe if you're a beginner, maybe if you don't really know what you're doing, or maybe you don't care, and maybe you're just not really that good in all these kind of things. It's sort of like, I want to be a musician and a guitarist and play the guitar, and I'm not really that good, and so I'm going to like do some of it on the guitar and then on the actual physical instrument, and then other things I'm going to use virtual tools, and then I'm even going to use AI or some other type of like algorithm or a sample to produce the guitar sounds for the rest of it. And that's perfectly fine, and that technology should exist, quite frankly. It should not be reported as being better. It should not be reported as this is better, right? Because that is false. It's not better, right? It is just not. The fact that you can force multiply, creating like less useful, because here's the whole thing. The entire usefulness of the LLM is the fact that it was trained on high quality human data that didn't use AI to fucking generate, right? And again, I'm just going to ramble and keep going. Like, the next piece is this idea of human in a loop. And actually, before I get into this, I'll just close off this quick micro tangent and then get back on track, which is it's all fucking human in the loop. We are humans, right? As far as we know, we are the apex predator and the number one entity on Earth. And so everything we do is a human affair. Everything we do is for other humans and ourselves, which are humans. So generating shitty, awful stuff is shitty, awful stuff to humans, right? It doesn't mean it's shitty and awful stuff to computers, but we don't give a fuck, right? If a computer generates something that we have no interest in whatsoever, how is that monetizable, right? It's only monetizable if you bind something human to it that the human instinctively cares about. And this is the chess idea where everybody cared about, the chess, the master, grandmaster chess player versus Big Blue, the computer. And everybody tuned in and was super excited. Why were they excited? Seven deadly sins, pride, greed, or whatever, right? They were all interested in this idea of like, you know, can a computer beat a human and whatever. And I think that it's the same idea as like, can you encode, arithmetic in adders and these other sort of like low level digital systems? Yes. So what is chess? Chess is a bunch of computation algorithms. So can you encode those into a computer? Yes. So then is that artificial intelligence? No. And this is the thing, like it is uh it's not intelligence because intelligence is something we can't articulate. Is it a useful tool? Yes. Does it complete an action successfully? Yes. Is it, but it has no goals. And so I'm fairly certain that intelligence is the ability to succeed in a goal. And then they say, smart is as smart does. Okay, I'm smart, so I have smart goals. And then I'm smart, so I succeed those goals. Well, a calculator that can do arithmetic using digital adders is not any of those things. It's a tool that can successfully output a result. How is that intelligent? How is that setting of any type of goal? I guess the goal would be do this thing, but I don't know, maybe that's a weak argument. Going back on track, and I'm going to lose it a little bit, but I think the next piece that I wanted to get into was LLMs and AI don't stop there, right? So the fact that you have this uh, idea of like pre-training and then like post-training, which again, I'm going to just use context clues here, but pre-training is the corpus data and the gradient descent and the bullshit where you basically like feed it, the entire internet, which is a bunch of useless data, and then you make sure to weight it with Reddit, and you do whatever, and basically, that's the trained next token thing. And then you have the post training, which is like the reinforcement learning, which is like make it more Shakespearean, and then you can make it more Shakespearean. That is how I understand it, and it could be a little bit off, but I mean, that's kind of first principles. So now the next piece is this idea of agents, right? And this idea of like making useful, more, making LLMs more useful. That's the idea, right? Solving more problems. And so now you have this idea of agents and agentic software, right? Or agentic systems, which are basically this idea that if you have an LLM which understands language and can classify intent using the large language model, right? So the next token for, if we're going to use a very simple example and we're going to say, like, I want to try to use an LLM, an AI, to make a customer agent, right? Somebody that's like a customer person that handles, customer problems, triages issues, and is like IT support, right, or any type of support, which is the thing that is the only fucking thing. But anyways, that's just, it's just what everybody goes to, and it's the simplest fucking example because it's just so stupid. But anyway, so okay, you get this guy from from India or whoever, and I'm not even hating on these guys. They're fucking awesome, and I've worked with many of these dudes. but they do typically come from these specific areas in the world. And so, anyways, their job is this, like, human classifier and then action, right? So I triage something, something comes in, it says it's super critical. How do I know it's super critical? They say that their shit doesn't work, and they're paying for it to fucking work, and they pay us a lot of money. Okay, critical. I then send that to the right person, and then that right person handles it, so the person continues paying us. Okay? And that's what people want to do with these LLM AI systems, right? Okay, that sounds like a pretty possible thing. I would imagine that that's possible. So now you need agents, because the next piece of it is taking action. So you have the LLM, you encode the classifier, you say, okay, somebody said this shit doesn't work, right? And I'm not even gonna go too deep, because, like, it doesn't actually fucking work, and I don't think anybody, like, are using these systems, and I think they did for publicity's sake. But let's not get too dragged down into the hype and the bullshit. Let's just stay at the technical and the first principles. To design that system, you'd have the LLM classify, right, that set of tokens. You would say that their shit doesn't work, and they're paying us a lot of money, and the guy seems really fucking angry, right? And if it's if it's at a company that actually gives a fuck, we're gonna actually pass him on to something useful. We're gonna move him ahead. We're gonna list this as severe, and we're gonna triage it as such. And the next piece of that is writing a report that uh, documents his problem, sends it to a technician or an engineer or somebody to solve it, to that team, and then also makes a reply that says, dude, we're working on it. Please be patient. I'm sorry. We're fucking terribly sorry, and please stick with us, right? Continue paying us millions of dollars. That is where the agent comes in. And so now you need to kick off some, basically, program that will do the actions of making the report, sending the report to the team, and then responding to the person. And generally this, like, opens up a case. And the case is, like, dealing with this person's issue, or an issue, and all these systems have these little things, right? It's very fucking simple. And now we get into this idea of tool calls, right? Which is what makes an agent an agent. So now you have this LLM, right? And the LLM is basically like always up, always responsive, right? It's one API call away to classify. Well, what you can also do is you can have a ability to essentially set, like, a system prompt within the LLM, or whatever you call it, doesn't really matter, that can basically say, these tokens match these tool calls. So if somebody says, if we're going to build this system, then I want a way that, like, all of this can be automated. And when I see the word, like, send, and then I see a name after that, basically call a email service that is an API, and then I just simply set the request to that API with the data to send it to that person, right? The to address, and then the body of the content, which is whatever, it does. And now I'll take it one step further and say, generate the case structure data off of the thing, right? So now you have a system that essentially will do another tool call to another API, which instantiates this, like, case, and then in order to get that data, you can use a tool call to formulate it, or you can use the LLM itself to formulate it, because it knows JSON and it can work with it, right? All very cool, all very useful, all very legit. Okay, that's what these tool calls are. And then there's a bunch more things like fine-tuning and these other tactics to get these probabilistic systems, which are next tokening, to behave more deterministically, so you can use them for these workflows, for these systems, for these things, right? And just right there, we have gone over a lot of stuff that is definitely controversial. It's not obvious. It's not, oh yeah, that makes total sense. That's what it should be. We shouldn't have customer support people. And you might say to yourself, well, why is that? You just explained such a comprehensive, great solution that can handle all these edge cases so well. This is terrific. And the reality is, it's terrific until it doesn't work. Okay? And it's like any system ever that is trying to automate and handle a bunch of edge cases, right? And this is where you get into like probably scaling laws, and that's a little bit separate, but like this big O notation of problem space and math and P and NP and all this bullshit, which is like, I think it's bullshit because it's too encoded and complicated. They're not just saying what the fuck it is, but it's like, look, the problem space of like human activity and malicious human activity is such a wide vector space that you need to consolidate it into a deterministic input in order to work with it. That the other way, which is to try to capture as much of the probabilistic nature, is such a foolish system, right? This is the whole idea of like, computers, right, is to fucking compute. And so the better your inputs, the more, kind of, the better you structure those inputs, the better you can work with them, right? This is the whole idea of algorithms. And so if you get into the stratosphere of like, O of n complexity, which is like, you're trying to compute this thing, but it has n possible, like, input factors, then that shit could be like X amount of long, right? And there's a bunch of shit that's like, you can only compute these things. You can't even compute these other things, right? So if it's like arithmetic and it's these types of things, like, that's not, and I gotta be very careful here because my math chops and my mathematical understanding is pretty low. But if we just think about this first principles, and obviously, right, you have this idea where certain shit is straightforward to do and it scales, meaning that you can handle the computations like linearly or whatever, or exponentially, or whatever way that is not a problem for a computer. And then you get into these realms of problems which become really fucking hard for computers. And what I'm saying is, like, even something like customer support is such a hard problem for a computer. And you might say, why is that? And it's because of the environment, the computational network and universe of all of the programs and software we use today. It all sucks. It's all totally twisted around and not the most efficient thing, right? And a quick tangent is something like a printer, okay? A printer is literally the most straightforward thing ever, which is you want to print something. You have a digital version of something and you want to print it, or you want to scan it. But let's just stay with printing. You can buy a printer. The printer is $200. You can bring it home, and you can't just print something now. You have to connect it to your Wi-Fi. It doesn't come with a cable, right? Because that would be very simple. You would just plug the cable into your computer, which creates the link, and then you'd click print, right? That's how it used to work. They sold millions of printers that way. It worked flawlessly. But how do you monetize that anymore, right? You can't monetize a working solution that works correctly, right? That's done. That's just at that point, it's a commodity, right? It's just fuel. It's just grain. It's just a printer. It just prints. But now we can say having a cable around is annoying, right? In reality, it's actually not. It's not a big problem at all. But like wireless printing kind of makes sense, right? Like, hey, the thing's really far away. I'm over here. I can print, right? It's a good idea. But it doesn't work, right? And now in order to fix it, you need potentially all these other vectors of monetization. And so in that example, switching to a wireless system for that device was a bad decision. Not because it was a bad decision from like a user experience perspective, right? But because technically there is too much fucking baggage and bullshit for that to work. And that's the same thing with all these AI systems. From a user perspective, absolutely. Hey, look, if I could just, and this is the whole thing, if I could just wake up and then basically think in my head, make me millions of dollars and put me on a cruise ship boat and then like have a hot woman feeding me pineapples. Sure, that sounds like an awesome idea, right? But now go try to develop an AI system to get me there, to do all those things. It's not going to fucking happen, right? Sadly, it's so sad that's not going to happen. Well, except if you use Claude Code. That is literally how ridiculous this stuff is, right? So now you're getting to, again, back to the whole idea of like customer support. And it's like, you know, it's all research technology. It's all possible, maybe. It's all, whatever, just how this stuff works. But it's controversial because if you come to somebody and you say, look, we understand the first principles, we understand the physics of this, and this is how we're going to, tackle this solution, right? We're going to utilize like deterministic, straightforward things that are reliable, and we're going to force the inputs to be sanitized and deterministic. Like that's something you can use to innovate with, right? But if you come at it the other way and you say, we're going to capture all of the humans' craziness and all of the vector space for like malicious activity and problem sets and interdimensional things and just all this like randomness, basically, all this entropy. And that's how we're going to solve the solution. That just sounds like a grift to me. That sounds like that sounds like a capitalistic way of viewing things because like now with that system, you can make a lot more money, right? Instead of having an email system that fucking works, right? It works now. The system fucking works. Oh, it could be better. How could it be better? It could be better in these ways, right? And a lot of that's valid. But what isn't valid is, okay, now your email system is going to cost, $50 million. And this is the whole point, is like capitalism doesn't really want to do the hard work, right? Which is actually reinventing things, which is actually, and this is, again, this is just my thesis, is I have somewhat limited experience, but what I have seen is people who want to actually do the hard work, they aren't always, it isn't enough in the capitalist world, right? So if you create a technically superior solution, right, it's technically superior, it solves the computer problem better. Capitalism doesn't really care about that. That's actually not a useful solution to capitalism. That's actually not solving capitalism's problem, right? So say, for example, because I've been part of these companies, that you have like a database problem and the landscapes has changed. There's been more and more bullshit. There's been AI. There's been, different storage systems, different front ends, different whatever. And now you've got like a database issue for data, for a certain type of data type. Let's say unstructured data. And then you go in and you build an entirely new, very sophisticated, re-engineered, re-architected from first principles all the way up to, the actual end execution, etc. The cost is massively reduced. It's more efficient. It's better. And if capitalism gave a fuck, if society gave a fuck, they would switch that shit on everywhere, and everybody would adopt it, right? But that's not the world we live in. That's not the forcing functions. It's a nonsensical system that doesn't make any sense. But you don't want that. Instead, what you want is this: you want, what are the amount of tangential services that I can monetize, spin up, create, dismantle, recompute, and that is the solution that is going to get all of the funding, all of the things, right? It's optimizing for the amount of net wealth that could be created. And so that's where AI slots in, where it's enough of it's the perfect bullshit of like, hey, look, you have this, we're building a system to capture all of the intent, all of the messy, ridiculous intent of society and of humans, and we're going to cram it into this large language model, and we're going to run everything off of this large language model, and it's totally going to work. And instead of inventing a new, like, internet or a new, like, computational reality amongst the humans to support that, we're going to leverage the pre-existing system to do that. And that pre-existing system is fucking HTTPS. That pre-existing system is, we're going to build a bunch of tool calls and classifiers and things. And this is what I'm getting at, is like, I don't think the data supports that any of it is working. I don't think that people that did customer support for the masses has just laid off all those Indian people, laid off all those other people. And the reason that it hasn't is because the entropy for problems is in a problem space that's too high for the LM to solve and the pre-existing internet issues, which is why you had the humans. So now you're going to put the artificial intelligence, which you think is the human, which is not, because it's been built and programmed by humans. And so it's just a foolish, dumb thing. And that is the reality of it. And it's very, very, very lucrative because you can just keep creating bullshit. It's like a perfect bullshit machine. And that's of course what the whole fucking technology is. It's a bullshit machine. And not only is it a bullshit machine, it's stolen. The only reason it makes anything coherent at all is because everything was stolen. It would be so non-viable and straight up blocked by society and by humanity and by the law if it wasn't initially stolen illegally, right? So if you had to go to every artist for every picture that you want to train on and you said, hey, can we use this? The artist would say, no, you have to pay me. And the amount of royalty would stack up that it would exceed any amount of money you could get from any GCC country, okay? Any fucking petrodollar that you could get. It would exceed that, okay? So they had to steal it. And they stole it. And once you steal things and you can show how much money it makes, the law does not care anymore, right? So all these guys will never see jail time. Their companies will never get sued successfully. They'll settle for tiny little amounts. Nobody will ever be able to take them down. Why? Because that's capitalism. That's how the oligarchy works. That's how the tech feudalist system works. And so you can do things that way. That's how Carnegie Mellon built things. That's how all these guys built stuff, is they just broke the law and they broke the law in a way that created so much tangential wealth for the players that would actually care or have any power to do anything that they don't give a fuck. And what is your rebuttal to that? Please give me something that is more coherent in first principles than that. Honestly, like, are you going to say that that's not the case? Oh, it's more, society doesn't work that way. It's more, it's more nuanced than that. You're taking such a black and white, view. And here's a really interesting part. This is the last thing that I'm going to say, or last thing that maybe I'll say about this is like, the only people to ever tell me that, the only people to say, you, uh, you are wrong. You haven't wrapped your head around it, right? You aren't capturing the nuance of the discussion, are people who have a vested interest in that discussion, right? There are people who are building with AI. There are people who made a lot of money off of people that are financiers, or they did something criminal to begin with. And this is just honest to God truth. I have never heard somebody who is a righteous, moral person, who is somebody who's like boots on the ground, an engineer, does something, who says, no, 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 it's much more nuanced than that. No, no, no. Honest to God, right? It gets into all these kind of things. It's like a group of people say this guy's a piece of shit, and then the only people that say they're not pieces of shit are the people who are pieces of shit in some obvious way, right? And I guess the thing that is so crazy to say these words out loud is maybe I've just been gaslit by like that is such a basic arith arithmetic whatever, that is the most like basic arithmetic, that is the most basic obvious little piece of math there. And so the fact that you even would say, how is this even like a question, just means that somebody's been gaslighting you. And whatever, I mean, that's just reality. So, and please call me out if it's not. I would love that. I would love to see something different. And look, I'm also smart enough, or maybe think I'm smart enough, to know that we live in a world in which time is linear, or time is seems to be linear in that if you go from A to B, you can't go back to A, which means that when somebody says something, they're both right and wrong at the same time. Because if somebody's reality was correct at A, and now you're in B, the thing that was at A is sort of like not even possible to know anything about. So they could absolutely have been right, but you can't really know. So it's sort of a wash. So they're kind of right and they're kind of wrong at the same time. And that's useful. So I guess the next thing I want to talk about is let's see. The things that oh yeah. I really, 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 it's so rare for me to interact with a piece of technology today that really blows my mind, right? That really impacts me in a positive way, or in a way that is like powerful, and obviously there's just no way to fuck with it. There's no way to say that it's not that. Okay? And the example that I always tell people is a game engine. When you there is just no way to look at that in any way that isn't like, holy shit. That is probably the most powerful thing I've ever witnessed. You're telling me that people have created a like universe inside a universe, and you can basically be God, and you can creatively imagine and then enact a world from scratch where basically every single thing is possible. That is technology. That is fucking awesome, right? Creating like Shakespeare next token random fluff from Reddit. I don't know, man. That's just not really. That just sounds like pretty grifty to me. Like that just sounds kind of like a scam. And how much money does it cost to make the thing? So much money that you can't even wrap your head around it. It's actually impossible for you to conceive how much money it is. If somebody said it was 2 billion, that would be so hard for you to wrap your head around. But now somebody says it's 2 trillion. You literally can't even conceive in your brain how much money it is. It's actually impossible for you. So I'm sick and tired of people. Oh, and then here's the thing. There is absolutely nothing in the last 6 years I have ever touched or used besides Claude Code that is interesting, powerful, useful, exciting, positive, that has been produced by AI. Not a single thing. All I have ever seen from AI is this is useless, this is bad, we shouldn't have this, there should be laws against it, get rid of it, I don't want it, get the fuck out of my face, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. And again, let's go through the things. I worked at AI startups. I worked at, image generation, video generation, music generation startups. Awful, awful, awful things. Not a single piece of art ever produced anywhere I saw it. And the people that were so interested in using these tools couldn't even tell you what art is, couldn't even, had no taste, couldn't even, if you were to go into their home, they would live in a $6,000 rental apartment in a major metro and have Wayfair furniture and black and white decor only, right? They would have signs on their door that say like love, happiness here. Like the things they would create would be like a steampunk TJ Maxx, uh, like what do you call it? Like a steampunk. Um, oh man, there's a word for it where you like take a balloon and you put like wet uh stuff on it, and I don't know, it's some term. I'll come to it. Um, and they think that that is art. They think that the fact that they produce something by typing into a machine and having it produce something is like artistic. And they, if they were actually artistic, they would really fucking care what the pixels were on the screen. They would really fucking care what the output looked like in all aspects. And what they would care most about is that the medium they chose to use to produce it was a match for their internal view and universe on the world. They would really, really care, right? These people did not care. These people said, what can I do because I'm lazy? I'm not talented. No, I don't know. I can't even conceive of that. I have no fucking clue what any of that is, man. I'm just a guy, right? I'm a guy that wants to generate like a steampunk. All right, this is gonna bother me. I gotta look this up. Paper mache. Paper mache. I want to generate a steampunk paper mache guy because I saw that and it looked cool to me. Okay, that's the type of people you have at these companies. That's the type of people that are participating in like the capital markets. And that's really unfortunate because that's how you bring down what is great. And again, it's the natural cycle of the world, you know, and this is maybe the final capstone, the thing to end on here is like, um, to me, it's not being nihilistic or pessimistic to say that every great era has an end. And I don't think it's bad to say that or it's negative because it just means that there's another great era, right? That's how these things work. It's sort of like saying if you think positively enough, summer will go on forever, right? Like the season of summer will just go on. Let's everybody get together and go, we want summer, we want summer. And then summer's so great. It'll never be winter. It'll never be winter. And then summer will go on forever. And what I'm saying is that's not how the natural world works. That's fucking bullshit. And if you look at the history of time and you subscribe to this idea that I think is quite logical, I think it's first principles, that like the fourth turning and these turnings is a concept worth understanding and is basically right. It's not math, but it's basically correct in that you have these great eras, and then these eras come to an end, and it pretty much sucks, and then you have another great era. And so when you look at like all of these artistic mediums, they were at their pinnacle when society gave a fuck about making art, and it was a collective like state of mind. It was like a I don't think the word like racial consciousness makes sense here, but like it was in the water for that time. And why was it in the water for that time? Because previously everybody was fucking totally non-artistic and retarded all the time and stupid and fucked it all up. And then you had the people who spawned in afterwards and took a look and said, dude, this is ridiculous. You guys are such numbskulls. Uh, we care about beauty. We care about aesthetics. We care about influencing the world. And it's real. Here's the other thing I'll say about it, which was fantastically interesting, is the other day I'm driving around my little area here, and I'm driving around and I see all these vehicles, right? And you go to a stop sign, you see a car, you go to a light, you see a car, and as you're driving, you just see all these cars, right? And all the cars look exactly the same, right? They're all the exact same, plus or minus maybe 5% or 10%, right? You have a sedan, you have an SUV. That's it. You don't have anything else. Sometimes you have an old classic, oh, hey, whoa, that guy's got a tuner, or a classic car, and that guy over there's got a tuner. But the shapes and things are all kind of the same. Well, then I saw a post truck, right? The USPS post truck. And I've never seen this one. It wasn't a normal SUV style, like weird sort of truck, like a Ford, or not a Ford, a Jeep. It didn't look like one of those like Jeep things. It looked like something out of like a Dr. Seuss thing. It was like a massive top. Literally, it was so strange. It was like the cub was, or the cab rather, was very low to the ground and smushed, and then it had like a massive back and butt, and it was just very strange shaped, and it elicited an emotional response from me. Right, I saw it and I was like, "Wow, that's such a strange vehicle. I enjoy that presentation. I enjoy the aesthetic. I enjoy the function of it." Right, the function of it is so interesting, and they could have designed something differently, but they chose to design that, and it made my day hopeful because there was like a quirky weirdness to the way that that vehicle occupied space in reality. And the forcing function of capitalism, late stage capitalism, the administration, this dying mindset of grift and collect it all at the very end, right? You have people that are in their 80s and 90s who are senile, dumb, half witted, pain pilled, ambient Ritalin, IV drip, saline, and they're literally grabbing on to money and power because they know that they are threatened by everything. That is leached out into everything. And so we get things like AI and we get things like uh, wars and control of resources and all of that. And it's a natural course of winter. And it's a natural course of, in order to have spring, you need this to happen and you need people to bring it down and fuck it up. It doesn't mean they have to destroy it fully, but you kind of need those people to die off, and then you need the new people to come in and go, let's not do that, right? Let's not hoard all of the resources forever and come up with a bunch of useless shit that nobody cares about. Nobody gives a fuck about what they do for a living 99% of the time. Nobody gives a fuck that the email system is annoying. No one cares. It does the thing it needs to do. Then you have the group which care, which are chaos monkeys, and before they cared in a positive way, now they care in a negative way, right? Positive meaning I want to make that person hate their job less, right? I want to make that person have more control, more autonomy, more agency, and a higher success rate and a lower stress factor. So I'm going to design things that smile at you, that breed emotion, that breed, all these types of emotional factors, they're going to occupy space in a fun way. They're going to do these types of things. Now, right, it's I'm going to steal your job. I'm going to threaten you. I'm going to create something that will put you out of work entirely, put you on the street. I'm going to come up with something that will, and again, what are we trying to do? We're just trying to make the email system better. And I think that is the most telling example that we are in these final stages before like a turnover. We're in like kind of, either the beginning of the winter or hopefully the end of the winter to say like it's obvious that that is where people's heads are at and how stuff is happening. And all I have to say is hang on, challenge it. When people start telling you you haven't wrapped your head around it, tell them, explain to me in first principles why this is a good solution. Don't conjecture. I mean, you can conjecture, but like, let's have an accurate conversation about this. I don't care about the technicality of, I'm using OpenClaw and because you think that it's cool. You think you're relevant and you have like you think you're safe. And let me tell you, dude, you're not. Joining the enemy or joining the force of evil and destruction is not good. Um, you need to be objective. You need to be coherent. And this stuff is not coherent technology. I'm sorry, it's too controversial. Parts of it are, parts of it are useful. I love Claude Code. It is a very useful tool. Unfortunately, it doesn't work all the time. I wish it did. I wish that I didn't have to code. I wish that computer systems I could interact with and produce exactly what I wanted. I wish I could be a millionaire where all of the dollars made were the most positive impact on every human in existence, and I was loved and cherished by the masses. I had a 10 out of 10 GF, and I lived in every country and experienced every culture instantly. That would be great. Um, I don't think the path to get there is putting people out of work. Okay, so that's the final transcript there, and hope you enjoy.